Hello everyone! So today we're talking about the secrets of saddle fitting the horse industry doesn't want you to know. Because guess what? There are a lot of them. You know, mostly in saddle fitting videos and things like that, they talk about how to measure the seat, kind of how to measure the gullet, which most of those videos are actually incorrect as far as gullet measurements go. And then furthermore, if you have a quarter horse like me, they'll tell you that a 7-inch gullet is equal to a full quarter horse bar, and that is a myth. It's not true. The bar and the gullet are completely different. I ended up looking up a video and found a feller who was a professional saddle maker, and one of the saddle trees that he had displayed on several of the horses, he kept claiming fit the horses great, but turns out that wasn't true. And I'm pretty sure he was just in it to sell his work, which he sold some nice saddles. However, the saddles did not fit the horses. And the misinformation he was giving was just going to make, well, it's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money and a lot of heartache. Because if their horses start bucking because the saddle fits them wrong and he's in pain, people are going to blame the horse, thinking their saddles fit, and they don't. And someone can get seriously hurt, and the horse could go to slaughter. I mean, things just could get so much worse from there. Vet bills, chiropractor bills. Just get a saddle that fits your horse. It's worth its weight in gold, no matter how cheap or expensive it is. If it fits, it fits. Leave it alone. But in the meantime, we gotta talk about these misconceptions, because there are quite a few of them. So again, most people talk about the saddle seat, the gullet, and the misconception that a gullet is a bar, and it's not. Here are the things we're going to be talking about in this video. So make sure you have a pen and paper handy, because you're going to need it. And this video is going to be kind of long, so I'm kind of sorry. But I'm sorry I can't be too sorry, because this is information you guys really, really do need to know. So the rock, the twist, the flare, the cap, those things are never talked about, and these all relate to the bar and how they fit your horse. The back gullet is never talked about either. The rigging, it's kind of talked about. But these are the things we're going to talk about. So if you want to stop this video and write these down on your list of paper, go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm just going to dive right in. So I ended out making a makeshift saddle tree because I didn't really have any other option, and this was very flexible. So, and since I have my miniature horses, I can turn them different directions so you can see different kinds of backs, particularly. This horse has more of a thoroughbred type back, and this guy has very much of a quarter horse, or I should say a working quarter horse type back, like for roping or ranching, that kind of thing. So two very, very different horses in through their backs and how they're put together. So this should be helpful, I hope. Now I took some bread tins and cut the bottoms of the tins out and glued them to the backs of leather, so hopefully this will be enough to show you what I need to show. Right, so first thing we're going to talk about in the saddle fitting on the list, because I'm going to forget what's all on the list if I don't have it down right here in front of me. First thing we're going to talk about is the gullet width. Now most people know how to measure the seat, which is, you know, front of the gullet to the back of the cantle, or to the top of it I should say. Easy stuff. You can look that stuff up online. No, not really any problems there. However, measuring the gullet is a different story. The gullet measurement, if this saddle were completely done with all the skirting and everything else and the saddle horn, this is actually a Western saddle tree that I made. This is just the tree, nothing else. So if you want to look up Western saddle trees on Google, go ahead, be my guest. But the gullet is measured underneath your swells, which here's the swells, here's the bars, here's your cantle. That's the only 4 parts to a tree there are. Your gullet measurement will be right underneath your swells, from the inside of that swell to the inside of that swell. And I've kind of, because I've sewn it a little bit, you can kind of see about how that would work. Now on your western saddle, you will have a concho right here in this location. Now those conchos help hold your rigging in place, and again we'll get to that later on the list. But those are also your markers for where your gullet is. So kind of handy. It's like the only saddle that really does that effectively. So you measure from underneath the swells, from there to there. That'll give you your gullet width. And your gullet width, guys, just tells you this. Just tells you how wide the gullet is, nothing else. Now the gullet height, since from here to here is your gullet, from this point, imaginary line, straight up underneath is your gullet height. Now that will allow you to sit a horse that has high withers. This guy, because he does have very high withers, he would need a taller gullet to be able to fit that. Now this guy, he's very mutton withered. He almost has no withers whatsoever. He doesn't need a tall gullet. In fact, probably a shorter gullet would fit him better, because something that's too tall will probably end up sliding around on his back. So something that's going to sit a little bit closer down to him will help anchor that saddle more in place. Won't slide, especially if you're roping. You don't want your saddle sliding. That's not fun. Yes, that has happened to me. So fond memories of riding a horse with my saddle on sideways. So that's your gullet width, your gullet height. Now we're going to talk about your bars. And again, here is your bar. When they tell you it's a full quarter horse bar or a semi-quarter horse bar, all they're telling you is what angle that bar is sitting at. So basically, if this angle were a semi-quarter horse bar, really close together, you know, really sharp angle, or steep I should say, that would be a full quarter horse bar. So the gullet never changed, just the angle of my bar. So full quarter horse bar, semi-quarter horse bar, it tells you what angle that the bar is sitting at. The gullet tells you how far apart it is. So I hope that makes sense, so you can kind of see how that works. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is the bar itself and all its many, many wonderful little parts. Because there are a lot of parts to this bar. Just because the gullet width and the gullet angle is at the correct angle for your horse doesn't mean the other features are going to work. So here, if you look at this horse's back, you can kind of see how he kind of has a little bit of a curve right through here, through his back. Where this guy has even more curve. So he's got a lot more. So when we talk about rock in the bar, this is what we're talking about. It's just that little bit of rock. That curve of that rock is going to fit that horse's back. So I hope that you can see that okay. So that fits just right in there. So that curve matches his back like it's supposed to. Now, when we talk about the twist, this is what we're talking about. I know that looks really, really funny, but if you look at this horse's back, you'll see how very flat he is through here, and oh look, the angle of his shoulder changes. So he gets very flat through here to very straight up and down through here. So that is going to be your twist. So your twist is going to start landing right about, just almost right underneath your saddle seat. You don't really feel it much, but the horse sure does. So now we've got the rock in there, and here we've got the twist. So that should match that horse's back. And you can see where that indents right there on that twist. That is a good thing. That's going to make it so that as your horse moves, and his shoulder blade comes up and moves, he's got room. So this is really, really helpful. Now, that's how that bar sits on this guy for the rock and the twist. Now this guy, again, he's so wide, broad-backed. Something like this is going to be too much for him. So, if I match just the back, you can see how much twist and rock that is. Now, that rock, because he's so flat-backed through here, that rock is going to actually put pressure in his spine right underneath the saddle. So as you're riding your horse, you're trotting or you're loping and you're moving, your whole pressure is right on that twist and that rock, right under the saddle. So every move you make, you're digging right into his spine. What's going to happen eventually is the horse can get sway back from that. We don't want to do that to our horses. Riding is a privilege, it's not a right. They are doing us a favor by allowing us to strap other dead animal hides to their backs. We need to do our best to actually take care of them. And this is the stuff that isn't talked about in saddle fitting, and it really, really should be. So there, we've talked about rock and twist. So we're going to keep going on. I'm going to bring out my makeshift saddle tree here. So if I measure, or I shape the saddle tree right down to this horse's back, and I do have some threads right here because I've sewn some of the pieces together. So some of those threads underneath are going to create some, I should say, pressure points. So it's going to push the tree a little bit up off his back more than I actually want it to. So please be considerate and just bear with me. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got so you can kind of tell what's going on here. That's kind of dark, but I hope you can see. So that hopefully is trying to match the curve of his back. So I'm just going to press that right there. So if you look at the bar, you can see that there's no space between his back and that bar. The lay is just flush. Right here again it's picked up because of that thread. But for the most part it's sitting right close to his back. Now if I take this tree without reshaping it and stick it on this guy's back, hopefully it'll stay. Can you see that pressure point I was talking about with that rock being right underneath the saddle seat? So that contact right here underneath the seat is going to make him very, very sore. And again, he's got a lot of pickup off the bar back here, and again the same thing underneath the bar in here. So that is a very, very bad deal. So you don't want to have that. Your horse will absolutely get sway back from that. So reshaping the saddle to this guy, so again you can see that bar fits him like it should be. There's no space underneath the bar. That's what you want. So take this tree that now fits this guy and put it on this fellow. Slide it up into the proper place where it's supposed to be. And if you look, now you have daylight underneath where the rider would be sitting. What this does, he's got contact on his loin, he's got contact on his shoulder, but this is going to create bridging on the horse's back. If you ride up and down hills, that means the front of your bar is going to be digging right in here into his shoulders. It's going to make his ribs swell up underneath that shoulder blade. It's going to rotate his shoulders forward. Again, to get out from underneath that pain, he's going to hollow his back. He can end out from sway back with that. Also, you'll have loin damage through your horse's spine. You can end out with kissing spines and other issues from the bars constantly digging into the horse's loins. If you do a lot of sliding stops or reining or roping or any of those really high capacity sports where your horse's hind end has to get up underneath of himself, he's not going to be able to do that with the backs of those bars digging into his loins back here. They just cannot reach underneath when that is restricting the movement here. So FYI, don't do that. So now we're going to be talking about saddle flare. Now, saddle flare only refers to the back portion after the cantle and the front portion before the swells. Now, the flare, what its job is it's just this. So take that and flare it out. Take that, flare it out. Now, if you have a horse that is gaited, having a saddle that has more flare is hugely important. What happens is as the horse is walking, he's going to pick up his shoulder and rotate it like this with every step. As that shoulder blade comes back, I'm going to put this on his back so you can kind of tell. Oh, maybe I won't do it on this guy because he's too dark. I'll put it on this one. So as that shoulder comes back, that shoulder blade comes up, it's going to be coming up underneath your bars and your flare. If that's not flared out enough, his shoulder's going to be coming up and hitting those bars. And if you have a different kind of an angle or a shape, which we're going to be getting into the cap, this kind of falls into under the cap category. If that angle on the front end of your flare on the bar is a little too sharp, you're going to be cutting muscles through the horse's shoulders. So as he's moving up, he's going to be hitting that edge of that saddle. If it's not flared up away from him enough, he won't have room to bring that shoulder back and move it like he needs to. So that's a huge problem. Same thing if the back flare is not quite wide enough. Again, it's going to create pressure points digging in here, even if the angle of the bar is correct, even if the flares, is where it needs to be. But if it's not quite wide enough, you're going to be cutting muscles and doing some damage back here in the horse's loins. It's not fair to the horse. We can do a better job. Now we're going to talk about cap. For this, I'm going to have to draw this out for you guys. So I had to borrow a marker because I didn't have one. So hopefully this shows up. So if this were the edge of my bar, let's say that's the very edge, like right here. Just like that little line. Now, the cap lets you know what kind of contact it's going to make on the horse. So if I have a very flat or a flatter cap, it's going to come like this on my horse's back, which is fine if he's very smooth coming up to his shoulders or to his back and his loins. But if I have a horse, and here's the edge, if I have a cap that's rounded and my horse doesn't indent through his shoulders or his loins that much, then what I'm going to have is the cap is going to be pulling my bar away from my horse's shoulder. So if my horse's shoulder is like this, in here, marking the horse, you're going to have the bar pulling away from the horse. And this area right through here is where you're going to have a pressure point. And you will have that right there. You don't want that on your horse. And again, if you have a horse that comes like this, or has a little bit more curve, you're also going to have bridging points. Either right there, and again, I should do it like this. You're going to have bridging points there and there. Where this is an area where the bar is not going to make contact with the horse's back. And that's the cap. So the cap refers to what kind of curve is on the back of your flare, the front of your flare, on your bar, and that hopefully makes sense. I'm doing the best I can, so I hope that this is working. Now when we talk about back gullets, the back gullet is very important too. Actually, I'm not going to use that makeshift tree. I'm just going to use my makeshift bars. So sometimes the bar will sit a little bit differently on the horse's back. Sometimes it'll be too close together like this on the horse's back, or too wide. Sometimes if it's up too far, you're going to be pinching your horse's withers. If it's too close together in the back, you're going to be pinching the horse's spine again, which can also cause kissing spines and a whole bunch of other issues. If your back gullet is too narrow, which for here you have your horse's spine all the way through, he's got tendons and everything. If you've ever ridden bareback, you'd feel it. But those tendons, as the horse is walking, will lift up and down, up and down. With the saddle, if it's too narrow, you're going to get this motion going on with the back of your saddle. And that's a telltale sign that your saddle gullet and the back gullet is not fitting your horse's spine. So do not use that saddle on your horse. These things all make a huge difference. I'll briefly touch on the rigging. Rigging lets you know just where it sits. If you have a horse that their withers, which this guy's withers line up right with his shoulder, this guy would probably need a 7/8 position rigging. Now the rigging will usually line up from behind the gullet, or right at the gullet, or sometimes in front of the gullet, which those different measurements mean a lot. If it's too far forward, you're going to end out with a saddle that's tipping like this. And again, it's going to create other pressure problems and sores on your horse's back. The guy who was a saddle maker said, if you just tighten down your back cinch, it'll bring the back of the saddle down. If you do that, you're going to be restricting the horse's breathing through his lungs. He won't be able to get under himself correctly. It's just going to cause a whole bunch of other issues. So please make sure your tack fits the horse, especially for the job he's doing. Again, riding is a privilege, it's not a right. And I'll go in and make a second video with a follow-up so you can kind of see a little bit more about what I'm talking about. Alright, I'll wrap this up.